if you look at some of the numbers that we have, 8 people have been arrested for spreading fake news during this period of COVID-19. And of course, that Regulation 11, subsection 5, regulation gazetted as part of the Disaster Management Act, saying you are liable for spreading fake information if it is proved that you published that information. Let's talk to William Bird now, Media Monitoring. William, good evening and thank you for your time tonight. What has the Digital Complaints Committee seen in this time from March up until now in as far as complaints on fake news?
Hi, good evening. So we've had just over 420 complaints around there somewhere. And we've seen all manner of things really in relation to the COVID-19 crisis. You get things that are suggesting that vaccines don't work, that if there is a vaccine, they're going to use it to inject, many devices into all of us to control us. And the thing that's really interesting is depending on which, source is putting it out, they'll either say things like, well, you can blame the Chinese, or you can blame the evil imperialist whites, or you can blame the evil blacks, or whoever it is. So it's depending on the target of that, they use the same kind of nonsense to sort of promote the hatred of different groups and people. So you see that kind of thing. And then more recently, we've seen stuff still, despite being, 3 months into this, we've seen people saying, oh, well, this thing isn't really real. It's not it's just an invented thing. Or things like if you wear a mask, it's going to give you carbon monoxide poisoning. So it really is stuff that beggars belief very often. But it's also things that are there to make people fearful and to make them unsure about what's going on.
How have we as a nation responded? Have we protected the truth? Are people able to pick these things up and immediately dismiss them?
So for some of them, I think that the answer is yes, but bear in mind that disinformation works because it usually has elements of truth in it. It's sufficiently powerful that people go, well, this might be true. So the fact that we know so little about this particular COVID-19 virus means that it's a godsend for those seeking to disinform, because the amount of stuff we do know really is not that much. So for people to say this has now been proven by some kind of scientific paper or something, none of us really know that much more to dispute that. So it is a very rich environment to deceive people. And for that reason, I think that a lot of people may well believe things that frankly are simply not at all true. We've seen examples of videos of people in South African towns and cities, saying this thing's just made up, and don't worry, I'm brave enough to go and shake everyone's hands and get through this crisis together. So we know that they have clearly at least ingested some of this misinformation. I think that it's to our media's credit that they're out there doing their job every day, trying to make sure that people do get correct, accurate, and credible information. And I think that to that extent, our government has certainly through the Department of Health and Communication have really tried to make sure that they do communicate things that are accurate. But of course, there's so much around this virus that it just is, as I said, it's a minefield.
Yeah. Give your evaluation of how the media has really performed. I mean, many are saying even tonight on social media that media in South Africa, by and large, just collaborated with government in terms of the information that we got to government from government and reported that. Has the media done its bit to monitor government power? But also, have there been lapses? I mean, we know around particularly the story of the COVID-19 vaccines in Africa, there was a little bit of a lapse in terms of the reporting in the media there.
So, I mean, we're in an unprecedented crisis for our democracy. So have there been lapses? I mean, of course there have been. Have our media made, significant errors and stuff-ups? Yes, as have government, as has any sector of our society. It's because by and large this caught us completely unprepared in so many respects. Our scientists have made errors, everyone has, and I think that we have to take that into cognizance, that this isn't a time where you can expect 100% performance from people, precisely because this is an unprecedented crisis for us in this period. So to that extent, our media, I think, have performed incredibly well, given the extremely difficult circumstances under which they're operating. The fact that our government, unlike so many others around the world, have said, you know what, we need more information. We need media to be recognized as an essential service, which they did, whereas we've seen in other parts, in Brazil just recently, we've seen the president move to stop them from sharing their data and their statistics, whereas in South Africa, we're still trying, So have we got everything right? No, not by a long stretch. But I think that certainly our media, by and large, have a lot to be very proud of. I think that there's certain things like covering issues around gender-based violence, around issues of food security and malnutrition that we really need to have a consistent focus on. But as I said, I think with the extremely limited resources that we broadly have, when you compare to so many other countries, we've done very well.
Looking at disinformation per platform, Facebook accounting for 64%, WhatsApp 28%, Twitter 4%, and YouTube 4%. What does that tell us? What does that type of picture tell us in as far as the places where this content is being posted?
So that, bear in mind, that was just over a week period. So if you look over the full period since the 22nd of March, which is when we started doing this particular monitoring and reporting, we see that actually Facebook and WhatsApp account for roughly 64% of all complaints we've received. And that's pretty much speaks to how people receive information, but it also talks to how those who seek to disinform have realized that WhatsApp's a very effective platform. It's effective for a number of reasons. One, because if we find something that's a problem on Facebook and Facebook finds that they can remove it or they can de-escalate, whatever their options are. Whereas if you see something like that on WhatsApp, it's incredibly difficult to remove that because it's a very personal, interaction. It's on your device and it comes from friends and family. So it's things that you're far more likely to trust and take seriously than you would some other kind of platform. So to a degree, it speaks to the nature of the social media platforms. But I think that there's also validity in saying that these are platforms where there hasn't been sufficient response necessarily to say, how are we going to de-escalate this thing and how are we going to combat this problem of disinformation on our platforms?
Talk to me then about your views on Regulation 11, subsection 5. Has it been effective in any way to deter the spread of fake news?
So we saw, well, look, I think there's the first point that we need to make is any decision to try and criminalize freedom of expression is a very, very dangerous thing, and it should set off warning bells. I think that that the Department of Justice crafted that particular section in a very careful way. It's very tight. It's got a very high burden of proof on the state. So you have to prove that you intentionally sought to deceive a person about very limited things. So it's not just resharing fake information, so to speak. And then we did see straight after or shortly after it was introduced that the government then made some efforts to arrest some people who were spreading it. And I think they saw that as an active effort to deter people from doing that. But again, a lot of these things are, they fly under the radar. A lot of the intent behind disinformation isn't to have regard to the law or to have regard to regulation. So to that extent, it's another reason why seeking to criminalize isn't a good idea. But so I think that government's broader approach to say we support things like Real411, I think is a very incredibly constructive one. It's one that says we need to support media to do their job. Recognizing media as an essential service, I think it was a critical step in saying this is how you fight mis and disinformation, by making sure that the Department of Health was communicating consistently, that they're putting experts there, that they, those sorts of things are really important steps in helping to combat disinformation.